Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Big night in store for you. An exclusive interview with Miko Hihuiti, who has been involved with a very complicated First Nations issue. It relates to the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples. It involves the selling of fake First Nations citizenship. We'll explain how it all works, what's at stake, and why this is just all the way around a bad deal for everyone. Very important story. Perhaps one of the most important stories that we've been working on in the past couple of years. And we have touched on this before, but this interview should help explain things much more clearly. Also tonight, Hunter Biden found guilty. Found guilty on those gun charges. Just like Donald Trump, he's now a convicted felon. What does it all mean? John Scotty Rimby is going to join us. He has been following the story and will give us the details tonight. What else do we have going on? Oh, yes. Justin Trudeau's big capital gains tax grab. Well, it's been approved. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives opposed it. And as I indicated the other night, I think this is the basis for a class warfare election. This is the rhetoric that I hear being thrown around right now over this particular issue. This is what the election will be centered on, I think, largely. The economic issues, and on one side you're going to have the liberals talking about social justice, why we need higher taxes to pay for all kinds of free stuff. And if you don't support that, then you're just an uncaring, hard-headed, insensitive capitalist pig. And on the other side, you're going to hear from the Conservatives during the election about how we just can't afford another 4 years of Justin Trudeau and the tax and spend liberals, because it is putting the future of the country at risk, because it is putting the health of the economy at risk. So we have all that and a whole lot more coming up right here on the Maverick News Channel. Do not go away. We will be right back, and we'll dig into the Hunter Biden story right off the top.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV,
the entire world is watching.
On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, folks, we're just going to dial in here now to the Hunter Biden story. He was found guilty today on felony gun charges. Hang on a second here while I just mute that. So, a jury in Delaware has found Hunter Biden, of course the son of the president, guilty on 3 felony gun charges. It has been a week-long trial. It focused on his history of drug addiction. He was charged in federal court in Wilmington with 3 felony counts tied to possession of a gun while using narcotics. He entered a plea of not guilty. The jury began deliberations Monday, deliberated for about 3 hours before returning with this verdict. So in court, Hunter Biden just looked straight ahead. The jury delivered the verdict. He nodded his head while it was read. This is another unprecedented moment in U.S. history, U.S. political history. This has never happened to the son of a sitting president before. So this trial is the first involving the offspring of a sitting president. And of course, Biden is in a very, very close race for re-election with former President Donald Trump. Biden, of course, has indicated that he will not pardon his own son. We'll see if that holds true. This is a very serious matter. 2 of the counts carry maximum prison sentences of 10 years, while the third has a maximum of 5 years. And under the guidelines, the federal guidelines, these recommendations, he could be sentenced to over a year in prison, but the judge could sentence him to more or less time. Each count also carries a maximum fine of $250,000. So far, we don't have a date for sentencing, but what we do have is John Scotty Rimby on the line right now. He has been following the story for us, and he's going to bring us up to speed here. John, how are you, my friend?
Yes, sir. Greetings to our Maverick News family worldwide. Greetings, sir.
Let me make sure I've got the audio up loud and clear here for everybody. Okay, so, guilty on 3 counts. Tell us what you know, sir.
Well, just to back up Maverick News family worldwide, this is another extremely historical day in the United States of America. Hunter Biden is the first convicted son of an actual U.S. sitting president convicted of criminal charges. It has never, ever happened before in the history of the United States that an actual sitting president, Mr. Joe Biden, would have his son convicted as president of the United States on 3 very serious criminal charges. Actually, the guilty came back, the jury, came back, I think, in a little around 3 hours with a guilty on all 3 counts.
Wow.
And Rick, if wink, if you've got your laptop handy, let's go back maybe a year or so. Hunter Biden had a pretty incredible plea deal put together.
Hey, John, there's a lot of noise wherever you are, and it's very hard for people to hear or even understand you. Are you at some place where they're in a kitchen or something?
Yeah, hang on.
Yeah, you
I'll
got to
just
go
move spots
someplace
here.
quieter,
Yeah.
or this isn't
Okay.
going to work.
I'll just. So, anyways, Hunter, he had an original plea deal. Okay, about a year ago, put together, and that fell apart, which is why he ended up in this trial with these, pretty serious criminal charges. And count one was basically falsifying a paperwork to purchase an illegal firearm, a charge to false statements on the transaction of a firearm, and then three, a false statement on the sale of a firearm. And, let's not forget that Hunter Biden, I guess he had a major crack cocaine issues and problems. It's pretty serious. Count 1 and 2 carry a jail sentence of 10 years each. Count 3, 5 years. Now he is a first-time offender, which probably is going to make a difference. But I imagine he's going to get a few years in Rikers Island or Alcatraz.
Now, are you being serious?
Well, I am being serious. I mean, in a joking way, but I mean, this is not a joke. This is, these are very, very serious charges found guilty by a jury of 12 of his peers, and there's some serious potential prison time here.
Yes.
Dr. Jill Biden was in the courtroom today, and you need to remember, like, Hunter Biden has been involved in some different oil companies around the world, and he's kind of been a bad boy for a while. Actually, I think, before all of this gun business happened. But pretty serious stuff, Maverick News family worldwide.
Wow. So, in my view, this might actually hurt Trump, because I think it takes, and you can give me your view on this, I think it takes away the punch from one of Trump's main talking points, which is that there's a two-tiered justice system, that he's being persecuted unfairly because anyone on the Democrat side doesn't get convicted or even charged. But here we are with the president's son, now not only charged but convicted on these 3 different counts. What do you think, John?
I don't know when the sentencing is, but I imagine it's going to come down on a much more lenient side, with him being the president of Joe Biden, sitting U.S. president at the moment. And Hunter Biden, let's remember, he is a first-time offender, and he's kind of apologized up and down about things. But I still would imagine he's probably going to get, I would think, probably 2 or 3 years in jail. What do you think, Rick? Is that out of line?
You know what? Because this is sort of, I have no idea, John, what's going to go on with the sentencing. I had no idea. I'm seeing some people say that he'll get a very light sentence. Other people thinking he's going to get more. I have no idea.
Well, I think this is really uncharted territory. I mean, this is pretty historical stuff today with this coming down.
Yeah, if the justice system works properly, Hunter Biden's status as being the president's son shouldn't matter. The sentence should just be applied based on the offense. Will that actually happen? Don't know.
Probably not. I think we all have the answer to that. There's people that don't think there's not political interference in this. I don't think. I would imagine there's a lot of negotiating going on behind the scenes with the White House and trying to, because in all fairness, Hunter Biden is a first-time offender. I think he's been in rehab. I think he's tried to clean up his drug problem, and we got to pray for him. Got to give him that.
Yeah, maybe.
I still think he's definitely going to do some jail time. I don't think there's any way around that. To save face for the American justice system, I think he's going to have to do 2-3 years in jail.
2 to 3 years, you think? Wow.
2 to 3 years, I think, probably minimum. Might even be more than that.
If that's the case, you know what I think? I think that they might sentence him to whatever, might be a year, 2, 3, whatever it is, and then he'll get like early release. And while he's while he's in custody, serving his time, I bet you they put him someplace where he's got his feet up and he's watching Netflix.
Well, Rick, he could do house arrest with Mr. Trump at Mar-a-Lago.
But
One could have each wing at Mar-a-Lago, you know.
But then you tell me that Trump won't have any alcohol to serve.
Well, yeah, Rick, Maverick News family, I don't think we can go and have a cocktail or a glass of wine at one of Trump's 3 golf courses, because allegedly it's breaking news that they're going to be stripping Trump of his liquor licenses at 3 different golf courses because he's a convicted 34-time felon. So, well, that's not good, Rick.
Jeez. They're just, they won't stop at anything, will they? They really want to get Trump.
Well, it's almost like little children in the schoolyard, eh? You know?
Yeah, but I guess with, you know, all the marbles at stake and the keys to the most powerful country on the face of the planet and access to nuclear weapons, I guess you get as childish as you need to, and as vindictive as you need to wrestle control away from your political opponent.
Well, and how much lower can it get with school kids in the schoolyard, eh? Throwing rocks at one another, eh?
Well, that's really what it has come down to. Well, sir, I think that kind of gives us the overview here and just some of the details on this case today. Any last thoughts or nuggets of information?
Yeah, I do kind of have a serious thought, and I would just like, if you'd allow me, I think on behalf of the Maverick News family worldwide, I'm sending our deepest condolences and prayers out to that Kingston, Ontario family with the baby that was found deceased. And I gotta really salute you, Rick, and Brian Howell out of Kingston, Ontario, for breaking the story and handling it in such a sensitive way. There is a 3rd bail hearing tomorrow.
Okay, well, John, let's not get into that, okay?
No, anyways, I just want to send our prayers out, Never hurts to pray for somebody and give them condolences.
Sure. Well, we'll stay on topic here tonight, and we'll address that story as it needs to be addressed.
Well, and let's not forget, we got to pray for Hunter Biden too. We got to pray for him as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. You have a great night, John. Appreciate your input as always. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, folks, I'll be right back. Stay with me, and we'll come back on the other side.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarmingly, some media simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
In an ocean of lies a century deep, the truth awaits. Choose not the red pill. Choose not the blue pill. For both are an illusion. Discover the power of M. The power of individuality. We are Mavericks. We are the way to the light. Fear not the storm. Join our quest for truth. Truth will set you free. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, and while this was going down in court, this was Joe Biden talking about gun control. Here, let me just cue this up for you. Delivering remarks at Everytown's Gun Sense University. And this ahead of the election, of course. This is going to be one of the main issues. Here we go.
You and to the entire country. Folks, you're changing the nation. You really are. You're changing the nation. It builds upon the dozen of executive actions my administration has taken to reduce gun violence, more than any of my predecessors, and I suspect more than all of them combined. Everything from cracking down on ghost guns, gun trafficking, and so much more. Folks, we're not stopping there. It's time, once again, to do what I did when I was a senator. Ban assault weapons.
Okay, so he's saying that while his son is. Did you see some irony there? Yeah, his son convicted on gun charges in court related to drug use, purchase of a gun, use of a gun. And then he goes and talks about gun control, and people cheer. And while he's doing that, there was this other statement at that came out with this as well, addressed clearly toward Trump supporters, suggesting that Trump supporters seem to have a desire to overthrow the government, but saying if you're going to get your guns, all you Trumpsters, you're going to need more than guns. You're going to need yourselves some fighter jets like Maverick and Top Gun.
By the way, if they want to think to take on government if we get out of line, which they're talking again about, well, guess what? They need F-15s. They don't need a rifle. By the way.
Jeez. What has the country come to where you have the president talking about people who want to overthrow the government, going to war, and rattling, not his saber, but rattling his F-15s? And I don't know. There's Joe Biden whipping out his F-15 in his speech for the whole world to see on display. Yep. Well, if Trump gets reelected, he'll have access to more than F-15s again. He'll have access to the whole nuclear arsenal and the conventional arms. And I'm pretty worried about all this because tonight we have Russian nuclear subs spotted off the coast of Florida in the vicinity of Cuba. I'll tell you, it's we've got a serious escalation here, folks. Echoes of the Cuban Missile Crisis. John F. Kennedy, 1962. My goodness. So yeah, I'm seeing all kinds of different reports about this, but I'll tell you, it's unnerving. I don't really know exactly how much weight to give any of these individual reports because I'm hearing everything from, they're just over in Cuba to there's been an actual almost like a confrontation between U.S. Canadian ships. I'm just going to see if I can find you the most recent info here. So, yeah, we have Russian military exercises in the Caribbean. 3 Russian ships, nuclear-powered submarine, which we told you about the other night. And so these exercises are not considered a threat to the U.S., apparently. But American ships have been deployed to shadow the Russians. And, boy, this is just... haven't seen anything on this level since the height of the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis, frankly. So we're going to keep a close eye on that. I don't think we're going to give it much more coverage tonight. I don't want to take this to a level where we're scaring the crap out of people unnecessarily. I'm not sure how much weight to give it. I'm just not sure. I've heard reports that the subs don't have nukes on board to reports that they do. I don't know what the truth is. But that's pretty much par for the course these days, isn't it? We don't really know what the truth is half the time. Maybe more than half the time. And even when we think we know what the truth is, we find out quite often that we didn't really get the right information. A man who set himself on fire. I didn't get to this story the other night, but I'll just mention it again here tonight. Well, not again, but it's a follow-up to a story we did back in 2022. This guy set a woman on fire at a Toronto transit station. His name is Tenzin Norbu, and in Ontario Superior Court, Justice Maureen Forrestal ruled that Norbu, who was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Naima Dolma by dousing her in lighter fluid and setting her on fire on a bus at Kipling Station. He was charged with first-degree murder, but they have found him not criminally responsible. This because he had a long history, apparently, of depression and had indicated that he wanted to set himself on fire many times. He was immersed in Tibetan politics, and I'm having some difficulty concentrating because I have audio playing in my head from another source, which is driving me nuts. Oh my God, stop it. Okay. I hate when that happens. You ever try to talk while you've got somebody talking in your ear? It's like counting numbers while you're trying to count or something. That's what it was. Same sort of thing. All right. I hope that explains what I'm talking about here. So yeah, that guy, he's found criminally not criminally responsible. Yeah, the victim was like 28 years old, set her on fire. So I don't know. It's just another case of serious mental illness, possibly somebody triggered by something. So often, though, this is just chalked up to, oh, that person is crazy or suffering from mental illness. I can see in some cases, though, it's about more than that. This one doesn't quite fit the same pattern that we've seen in some of these other cases of people setting themselves on fire, though. So we do know that he experienced repeated delusions. Evidence that came out in court indicated that he suffered from schizophrenia and may have been going through some sort of a mental breakdown at the time when he attacked this young woman. So he will be, of course, held in detention. He's going to receive some sort of care. It'll be reviewed annually. I think that's a pretty tough pill for the family to swallow, though, frankly. When somebody commits an act at that level, well, you can have your own opinion on it, I suppose. It's pretty self-evident to me what the situation is, and how the justice system is in a case like this, just not reacting in an adequate way. King Charles, do you remember that painting, the new one of King Charles? You flip it upside down, put two of them mirror image against each other, has satanic imagery in it. Well, it's on display, and it has now been vandalized by an animal rights group. Here, I'll show you what happened. It's amazing that these activists get away with this, like that they even get close to these works of art. But I suppose if you put them on public display, unless they put everything behind glass, and even then, I don't know if it will stop them. But here's what it looked like. Well, that one didn't last long before it got nailed by vandals. I don't think any permanent damage to that, but we'll see what penalty is imposed on the perpetrators of that piece of artistic vandalism. Today, House of Commons, Canada, Trudeau's capital gains tax has been approved in the House. So what's happened here is the Conservatives opposed this. They didn't indicate whether they would support or oppose it, but they sort of, I mean, we all knew they would. But indeed, that's what happened in the House today. But the capital gains tax changes passed anyway. And I'll tell you this, the government doesn't even have the policy fully formed yet. We won't even know until next month exactly. This is the strangest thing. They're imposing tax changes, but it's my understanding that they're still actually working out all the details. They have the basis for it in place. Get more details later, and they passed it already in the House. But anyway, the NDP and Bloc Québécois voted in favor, along with the Liberals, for this measure. The Conservatives came out against it. Yesterday, we ran clips from the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who connected the capital gains tax to social issues and free things related to healthcare, things like free birth control, saying that if we don't have this tax increase, young women will get pregnant. We can't have that happen, and other things as well. So it became, the economy, of course, front and center then today in the House of Commons during question period. Here's Pierre Poilievre, leader of the official opposition, Conservatives, squaring off with Trudeau over these issues. Here we go.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. 9 years ago, the Prime Minister promised that he would spend without control, but there would be a rich man somewhere who would pay, and not the middle class. 9 years later, what is the reality? 9 out of 10 members of the middle class are paying more in taxes. The wealthiest have doubled their wealth, their net wealth, according to a video put out by the Prime Minister a few days ago. And the majority of middle-class youth cannot even buy a home. Given that he has already broken that promise, why should we believe him now? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, our 2024 budget is based on creating generational fairness. Part of that is asking the wealthiest to pay a little bit more when they sell investments, very profitable investments. And it's with that we will invest in more housing for youth, more dental care for seniors, more spots in childcare for young families. We are there to help those who need it. The Conservative Party has just announced that they will side with the wealthiest. They won't be there to help the middle class and those working hard to join it. The Leader of the Opposition. That is exactly what he said 9 years ago, and the result, according to his own data published on his Twitter since his arrival in power, the wealth of the wealthiest has doubled. as taxes on the middle class and the cost of housing have also doubled. Mr. Speaker, why is it that every time he promises to increase taxes on the wealthiest, it's the poor and the middle class who foot the bill? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, the same types of justifications the Conservative Party gave in 2015 when they voted against increasing taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lower them for the middle class. It's the same type of argument they used to vote against the Canada Child Benefit that lifted hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. And today, they are in the same situation, defending advantages for the wealthiest in this country, while we are asking for a little more to help with housing for young people, helping seniors with dental care, and many other things, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
9 years ago, the Prime Minister promised he could spend uncontrollably and there'd be a rich guy on a hill somewhere who would pay the bill. The middle class wouldn't have to pay. Well, what is the result? According to him, the total net worth of the richest Canadians has doubled since he took office. Meanwhile, 9 in 10 middle-class Canadians are paying more tax. Housing costs have doubled, so 76% of middle-class youth believe they'll never afford a home. 2 million people line up at a food bank because they can't afford to eat on a middle-class salary. Given that he already broke this exact same promise over 9 years, why should we believe him this time?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if it didn't have real-world impacts on Canadians, it would almost be amusing to watch the Conservative leader tie himself in knots to try and justify voting in favor of advantages for the wealthy Canadians when they sell really profitable investments. We're asking them to pay a little bit more so we can invest more in housing for young people to be able to have the same kinds of opportunities previous generations did. We're delivering dental care for over 200,000 seniors in just the last 6 weeks. We're delivering more spaces in child care. We're stepping up for Canadians. They're stepping up for the rich.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Real world impacts. That's what we have today after 9 years of this Prime Minister promising to tax, borrow, and spend us into fairness. But according to the StatsCan data he put out himself since he became Prime Minister, the net worth of the wealthiest Canadians has doubled. Why? Because the taxes he puts always land on the middle class. 9 in 10 middle class people are paying higher taxes. The vast majority of Canadians, than 100% of middle class, are paying higher carbon tax, and his last round of small business tax hikes hit plumbers and electricians, not the rich. Why is it that every time he mentions the middle class, they get poor?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our price on pollution delivers more money to 8 out of 10 Canadians right across the country with the Canada Carbon Rebate. And today, Mr. Speaker, there's an opportunity for everyone in this House to stand up and ask the wealthiest Canadians to pay a little more when they sell extremely profitable investments. We are doing that on this side of the House. The Conservatives will be protecting the advantage that is there for the wealthiest Canadians while we invest more in housing, while we invest more in dental care, while we invest more in Canadians who need it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, if you are a small business owner, you have even $1 of investment gain, Prime Minister is promising, because there's no exemption inside the 300,000 small businesses. And it's incredible that during a housing shortage, he wants to tax home builders. During a healthcare shortage, he wants to tax away our doctors. During a food price crisis, he wants to tax our farmers. And while our economy is shrinking more than any other economy in the G7, he wants to tax our small business job creators. Mr. Speaker, isn't this the definition of insanity?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
For 8 weeks, since we put our budget forward, the Conservatives have been incredibly careful not to say a thing about the capital gains rate that we're raising. They didn't want to talk about it for 2 full months, and today, when they are choosing to vote with the wealthiest Canadians and against young Canadians who need more housing, young Canadians who need a better break, seniors who need dental care, they're all trying to spin it in 9 different ways. The reality is they have an opportunity to vote with middle-class Canadians, and they're choosing to vote against them.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly.
Okay. Enough. All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into... well, I'm going to tee this up first. We have, over the past, year and a half or so, talked about First Nations, United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, the impact that declaration from the United Nations is having in Canada, in the United States. And we did touch briefly on this story in the past. This is about an organization, or actually multiple organizations, selling First Nation status, citizenship within a First Nation to people who just self-identify as Indigenous. This is being challenged, and it is opening huge divisions within the country. The area of main focus is on an organization or an entity, a First Nations community called ASMAN. This First Nations community is at the center of this largely because it's comprised of Métis. It leaves the community vulnerable to interpretation and exploitation because the Métis are of mixed blood. They have many people within their communities who are of both European and Indigenous heritage. They have blood from Europe and from Indigenous peoples. This is why they have been targeted by, I would say, bad faith actors who are online selling citizenship. Why are they doing this? It's because people who are not Indigenous, who are clued into what's going on with the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, they understand that this United Nations Declaration is worded in a way that gives more sovereignty and even land back to First Nations communities. As a result, if you're not Indigenous, some people are very fearful that they're going to lose their property as the colonial system of government crumbles. And we are seeing very clear evidence of that. The federal government in Canada has been trying to address this in its own way by creating a second tier of within the justice system. They are revising treaties with many First Nations communities. They're taking a variety of different steps. But ASMAN is the focus of tonight's feature interview with Miko Hihuiti, who has been advocating for what she says is the true ASMAN nation. And she has leveled accusations that there are fake ASMAN entities operating online, and there is more than one. There have been, and there continue to be, multiple ASMAN nations being represented online. The ASMAN nation, as I understand it, as it's being portrayed to us, is one of the oldest First Nations in existence. with the recorded history going back as far as the early 1400s, beginning in Bolivia. Now, the Grand Chief for the Asman Nation, who has been ill, apparently, was reported to have stepped down, but then has changed his mind, and he's back, and he is continuing to assume that position and as the Grand Chief. But his name has been attached to several of these different Asman entities. There are accusations being leveled that the ones that are online, some of these fake actors, are really only in it to, well, they're in it for maybe a variety of reasons. For financial reasons, maybe to assert claims of sovereignty or power, to gain power illegitimately, as UNDRIP is integrated into our systems of governance here in North America on Turtle Island. Turtle Island, which is comprised of all of North America, much of South America, the Caribbean. This is like if you want to look at it, it's a giant land claim, First Nations land claim, with the backing of the United Nations through UNDRIP, through this declaration. In Canada, legislation has recently been passed making UNDRIP binding, meaning that all Canadian legislation, past and present, now needs to integrate with that United Nations declaration. And that's why we've seen all kinds of changes legislatively in Canada. We even saw references to it during the public inquiry into the Freedom Convoy, where a First Nations lawyer held the inquiry's feet to the fire to make sure that the proceedings were properly conducted and integrated properly into UNDRIP. Anyway, I digress. The point is, we have entities like this online. I should say, well, this is where, okay, this is one of the Asman websites that is currently up. Is this the legitimate Asman? That's still to be determined. There are assertions that this is illegitimate. It's not the real Asman of Turtle Island. And even here, they are offering to sell memberships, membership application, partnership information, and depending on which version of Asman you go to, you can purchase these memberships or citizenship for as little as $24 and a monthly fee, to as much as $270 some and a monthly fee. It depends on where you go. There's another one up. Ask it for equity. And also here again, they have been selling First Nations status. Why would someone want to do this? Because if you're just of European heritage, you can be adopted by Asman, gives you First Nation status, and then in the future, if you are afraid of losing your property rights, you'll have First Nation status and rights as a First Nations person. In other words, there are fears that First Nations peoples, Indigenous peoples, will have more rights than those who are not Indigenous, and you might even lose, some people are fearful that they might lose their property. That's why people are doing it. And many of these memberships have been sold across Canada. And there's a lot of money that has been trading hands. So our guest has been in court, the colonial courts, where this has been mentioned. Our guest is very well versed in the law, in all forms of law, including the current criminal code, the Canadian legislative system, And she is also familiar with what's going on down in the United States as it relates to all of this. So I tee all this up. I hope I didn't confuse people too much. The bottom line is, in this environment where people can self-identify as pretty much anything they want to, a lot of people are choosing to identify or self-identify as indigenous. Indigenous. Even though they have no First Nations or Native blood in them at all. It is, in the view of some, putting the heritage, the future of First Nations peoples in jeopardy, because this waters down what it means to be a First Nations person. Asmin, in particular, very vulnerable here because you have Métis, people of mixed blood. And even within that, it isn't clear if the federal government is even going to formally, or has been, or will formally recognize this organization as a First Nation anyway, going into the future. The Métis in Canada have fought vigorously for First Nations rights because of their mixed heritage, and the Canadian government has addressed that, and it has taken many, many years for the Métis people in Canada to get to the point where they're at today, where they do have enshrined rights within the Canadian system. Similar kinds of issues down in the United States. So stay with me. We're going to come back. Bottom line, they're selling fake First Nations citizenships to people who are not Indigenous. Some people seem to be making some money off this. I have to say straight up that none of this has been proven in a court of law. A lot of these are allegations, and I have to say these things for legal reasons. It's a very complicated thing. Who makes up, or who is in charge, or who represents the legitimate Asmin Nation remains in dispute. It isn't even clear, based on some of the court documents and other legal documents that I have uncovered during my research, what the, whether the Asmin Nation is even something that is formally recognized within Canada or the US, or even in international courts. I think it is, but that will all have to, this is all going to come out in the wash as UNDRIP is dealt with and is integrated into our systems. Everything is changing. Most people are not aware. Most people don't get what's going on at all. And as a result of all this, you have other groups that are trying to exploit the situation. Many of them sovereign citizens groups who have latched onto this, and other groups, including some freedom people, who are seeking to latch on and form alliances with First Nations communities, in particular some of these fake or maybe illegitimate Asmin groups, and hold them out in front as a shield against the changes in our system of government here that may leave many people with a whole different way of dealing with property rights. Let's take a break. We're going to come back on the other side with our guest, Miko Hihuiti, who has been dealing with this, the legalities of this, and she will explain all of it much more clearly than I have right here. Maybe I've confused you, but she is going to explain this, and it is one of the most important stories we've covered here on the Maverick News Channel over the past couple of years, because it really does affect, this is all about the future of not only Canada, but the United States as well. Stay with me.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now, at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program. For your mind.
Okay, I'm back, and this is a pre-recorded interview. You're going to hear about the Grand Chief, whose name has been attached to all of these entities, these Asman entities. The allegation here tonight is that the Grand Chief's name was used without his authorization, that it was basically stolen from him. A lot of things very strange about this whole story. What the truth is, time will tell, but here's our interview now with Miko Hihuiti, who will try to clarify things for us, and I'll just leave it at that. I'll let her do the talking now. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's important for people to understand what is really going on. Can you, first of all, just introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. My name is Miko Hihuiti. I am chief of the Choctaw Turtle Tribe out of the United States. I have worked closely with a lot of nations, and in this process have come across Grand Chief Wabisca, which I believe is the nation we are here to discuss today, and some of the issues that surround it, which extends to a lot of nations and a lot of issues. So hopefully I can answer all your questions, one, and hopefully it will also shed a little bit of light on things for others that are lost. I cannot tell you how many people have called me over this, and they're very, very lost because it's so easy to twist the words up into something that then makes it sound beautiful and almost too good to believe. And as I state many times over, if it's something that sounds too good to believe, I think you need to research a little bit before you jump into it and follow like a sheep straight off the edge of a cliff. So,
right. So let's back up here a little bit and explain to people so that they understand that there are a lot of changes happening within Canada, and First Nations across Canada and really all across Turtle Island are struggling to reassert their sovereignty in some cases and claims to land and resources. Why is that happening?
well, it's a broad picture. One, it is, I hate to word it this way, but it is the terminology we use here in the States of whitewashing out the traditional or the Aboriginal people in an effort by the colonial system, we'll word it that way, to take the land back. Everything goes back to a land grab. And in the Indigenous world, land, water, earth, that is all where our roots are at. We are connected with it. The colonial system and settlers, they're very known that if they own the land, they own the people. And so everything goes back to a huge land grab that you're looking at, and people want their sovereignty of the land. The UN has put out a declaration, I guess, of wording that has caused, I think, the biggest issue that we are facing right now. The wording of Indigenous is left very loosely termed. It is a colonial term that they are giving to people, saying that you have the right to self-determine yourself as an Indigenous, thus then being able to move forward in self-governing. All that falls under what is called Bill C-92 in Canada. If you look up the terminology, a lot of people like to look at it in the Black Law Dictionary. It's a very loose, again, term with a very loose definition. But if you are really trying to seek the truth about it, you have to look into the wordings and go into the Oxford Book of Law and then really understand what the Constitution of Aboriginal Rights is and what your wording is for, in the US, Native Americans. In the standing of Native Americans in the States, we are strangleholded by what is called a blood quantum. I'm not sure if anybody understands that, but what the blood quantum does is state that you are not recognized unless you carry so much blood within your veins to make you that traditional Native American. In Canada, there is three main families and three main lines, and they have the ability to then self-determine on the grounds of their lineage based back to those of the land. That means before the settlers came, those of the land. But if you look at UNDRIP, it talks about the ability to say that you were born on this land. And that has brought in a lot of confusion when you're discussing that in an open forum with people who are not versed in both laws. There are sovereign laws for Native and Aboriginals because you are a nation inside of a nation, nation to nation. So I'm a nation of people, of Choctaw people inside of U.S. soil. The same for Aboriginal people. They're a nation inside of the Canadian soil that have to coexist, but yet we understand we have our own governing rules, and Canadian government has their rules. That's our reality of where we live in the actual aspect of understanding what the government recognizes. I do understand this argument that you are sovereign of the land, you're one person under God, one soul, one voice. Totally understand it. That is common law. It is a practice that has been removed in the colonial system. So many feel you're dealing with a corrupt system. Do I agree? Absolutely. But in that, they're encroaching upon the sovereignty that was given to natives, given to Aboriginals in the beginning when the settlers, Mayflower, hit land and took it over from our ancestors. That makes it a totally different analogy when you understand that the law is talking about those of the land, meaning before the settlers got here. But giving that twist and using the UNDRIP terminology that's left loosely worded, it has turned into detrimental status for many people, considering what is going on inside of the Asmin Nation, the Anishinaabe Soul Train Metsa Nation. This is one of them, one of many. Currently working with law enforcement who is working to uncover what has gone on inside of that nation. Grand Chief Wabisca suffered a health crisis 4 years ago. And
so let's just slow down a little bit, because I think we're going to be losing some of the viewers in the way they can understand this. So obviously we have a lot of history here, and we're talking about legal systems, common law versus colonial law, or the Canadian U.S. laws based on the constitutions that are in place, etc. But what's going on is you have the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, which is a new document. This is something a lot of people are worried about. It's also having a direct impact on the relationship now between First Nations and our federal government here in Canada and in the United States as well. Things are changing. I see the federal government here trying to make some changes. You have the creation of a parallel legal system that is being established here in Canada. You have, but as a result of all of these changes and fear about what is about to come, people are focused on who's Indigenous, who isn't Indigenous, because certain rights will be afforded to those who are Indigenous based on UNDRIP and the treaties that are in place between First Nations and the federal government here. Am I on track so far?
Yep, and you just made a key parallel that people are forgetting. Based on UNDRIP and treaties. They're leaving off the treaties that matter when discussing just UNDRIP by itself. You can't do just one. You have to have both in correlation.
Yes. And so to kind of get to the core, the heart of the matter here today, there's Asmin, the Asmin Nation, that I think we're focused on here.
I like to clarify the name because it is under attack currently, and there are multiple fasces of it in this out there. I have been able to locate Asmin of Turtle Island, Asmin of Ascot. I also was able to uncover Asmin of Bora Boreala. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Boreala, yeah.
working with a ton of investigators on the U.S. side as well as in Canada, because this has now become an intercrossing of jurisdiction because of the fact that they opened it to Turtle Island.
Right. The reason, yes, and the reason Asman is at the heart of what we're talking about today is because it is the people who belong to Asman are Métis, and there is a mix there of European and Indigenous heritage and blood. Am I correct in that?
You're absolutely right.
And so I think what's happening here, if I'm again reading this correctly, is you have some people who are committing an act of fraud because they've established sort of fake Asman entities, and they are selling memberships or citizenship within the Asman nation, when in fact they really have no sovereign authority to be offering these citizenship packages for a fee to people who really are not Métis at all, that they really are not, they really have no claim to Indigenous rights. And so this puts the sovereignty of the true members of the Asman nation, it puts their rights at risk. It waters everything down. Am I, again, on the right track here?
You're absolutely right.
Right.
Something that is very hard for those that have been adopted, and this is the phone calls I've been getting. What am I to do now? I'm not seen as Asman. I'm not Aboriginal. And the only thing I can recommend to everyone that is listening to this call, go back and check your lineage. It seems and sounds to me that most everybody that's been born on Turtle Island has some level of lineage into Metza, at the very least. You can go back and prove it, but the UN document states that you have the right to self-determination. In that document, that self-determination means that you can say you're that, but it is then upon you to prove that based off of what you said and the treaties. You don't just claim something and so be it. If I claim, as I've heard the quote come from Grand Chief, claim I'm a Martian, it's up to me to prove that I'm that Martian.
Right. And so the reason I guess that a lot of people are doing this is because they are afraid of what's going to happen to property rights under UNDRIP and maybe other rights as well. So as the colonial system adapts or is maybe even replaced with something new, or is eroded or split, people are concerned that maybe they'll end up losing their property rights, other rights. So to protect themselves in that regard, they're signing up for these fake citizenship packages and memberships. Am I again correct in that?
And yes, you are. And through the investigations that have been going thus far, I've been able to see that there's a lot of them. So I would ask that everyone that wants to get signed up to that, you check your lineage first, and then you ask them about how they are recognized. Ask them for documentation. There should be some level of a documentation that shows that they have an Indian recognition, not a sovereign status, not a trust, not some sovereign citizenship movement trust they've set up and then claim to be sovereign under it. That is completely different than versus Aboriginal and Native sovereignty.
Yes. And so there is this process that they're referring to as adoption. Is there anything legitimate in that? And how does that factor into this? If someone were to, say, be adopted into an Asman nation or one of these, I would say, sort of fake Asman entities?
Again, in that instance, you can be adopted. Tribes can adopt people. There's looser restrictions on it in Canada and other places than there is in the U.S. If I adopt someone into my tribe, which you'll see is the Louisiana Choctaw Turtle Tribe, if somebody is adopted into there, they have to, again, prove their self-determination. And the only way that that is doable is going back and showing your lineage with a birth, death, birth death certificate back to 5 to 6 generations. That ties directly then to you. It can't just be all the way. Now, my understanding in Canada, as long as you can show the lineage and that you were born into the Nipissings or someone, you then can claim that in the Metza. I'm not sure with inside of First Nations. I believe it is pretty strict inside of First Nations. This also brings you to the topic of tribes that are banded and or ceded tribes versus unceded. That begins a whole nother level of people becoming more and more confused. And in doing that, the best I can tell you is the ceded tribes are those that are working within the government and are recognized federally and or state. We here in the States, Choctaw people are the third largest federally recognized tribe that there is. We are also a very mixed, diverse amount of people, which I see that is how it is in Canada with Aboriginals as well. It is easier for you to be claimed underneath that in Canada due to the fact that you do not have blood quantum status on you, as we do here, along with the proof of your birth or death right all the way to 6 generations back. Again, though, people are forgetting that part, that if you want to self-determine, you have to prove and verify that yourself. I cannot walk up to President Trudeau, President Biden, Minister Trudeau, whoever, say, Prime Minister, and say that I am now the president. I have to prove that. You still have to prove somehow that you are who you are saying you are. So adopting with no proof whatsoever, stating that anyone can come in underneath the UNDRIP rules is causing a huge divide, and in this instance, great problems for the Asmin Nation and the Grand Chief that actually has the lineage to be running that nation.
And so that is one of the core issues here too, is like who is actually in charge, who has the authority, which is the legitimate Asmin Nation, and how do we determine that?
Right. Again, you need to ask if you are involved with Asmin of Turtle Island or any of these others that are saying they're the Asmin of Turtle Island. The correct name of that nation is Anishinaabe Soul Train Metza. Ask to speak to the Grand Chief. We don't use terms like founders councils and such. We are people that use cultural terms, as in Grand Council, clan mothers, and then ask to see who that Grand Chief is. Grand Chief of the Asmin Anishinaabe Soul Train Metza, his name is Senior Elder Grand Chief Wabiska Miqua. No one else. He's the only one who carries the lineage to that name, and he also has that name incorporated. So anyone else who's working underneath that name is committing fraud.
What a mess has been created here. So how many fake Asmin entities have been created that you're aware of?
Well, it's unfortunate. They were all working underneath the disguise of Grand Chief through his illness. He has been in recovery for the last 4 years from a traumatic brain injury. And in doing so, this is unfortunately what happened during that time. It was left open. The gentleman that produces himself as the Attorney General actually has lost his law license in Canada and in the U.S., which has made this a cross-jurisdiction border investigation. Through that, they began setting up other websites. So my knowledge is the Asmin of Turtle Island, which investigators have told me that website is completely taken down. I then went and looked. Also, asmin.com. It also got taken down, and please do not go to that one. It is now up with a nasty site. And then there is the Asmin of Boreal. I know I'm saying that wrong. Forgive me. That site too is also up and running. So there are at least 3 that were taking in funds. There is also a foundation called Tumult Trust that was set up underneath Asmin of Turtle Island that is of a grave concern through this, because people were putting their belongings and assets into the Tumult Trust that they say will take over the Asmin of Turtle Island. I'm still grappling to understand the full of Tumult, even though I myself knew Asmin and then realized that a lot of the people inside of Asmin, after being approached about this, couldn't and didn't prove lineage to anyone through his illness, and was able to then take over. So unfortunate because, again, I can say a lot of people are struggling in these times, and they are, as you're worried, concerned about their land being taken and the crumbling of our colonial system and where that's going to leave them. And my sole concern, I don't like to call myself an activist, but I'm sure people see me that way because I'm pushing not only for our rights, but for all people's rights. And if we could just unite, just like Asmund and AIN were stating while Grand Chief was in his recovery, we got to unite. But if you go at it in the wrong way, the sovereignty that the nations carry as Native American Aboriginal is such a delicate flower that it could totally be destroyed. And then we are left with only that colonial system that is crumbling. And we all fall up under it. So work together with the people that hold the lineage and the ability to uphold that sovereignty for us. And then in doing so, the adoptions can properly take place and appointments inside of the tribes to then help us build up our nations. It's so important, but it's being handled in such a wrong way. And in my line of work, I see it as out of fear. People are running, trying to figure out what to do in fear of what is happening around them in the world.
Yes. And I know that in British Columbia, there has been a step taken by the provincial government out there to return land to at least, I think it's probably the First Nations tribe in a process that I think we're going to see become, it'll probably be like the first domino to fall, and we'll get more of these First Nations having land returned and total sovereignty. And through that process out in BC, in that one, it's up in the north, and I think it's just on the coast. But through that process, people are very fearful now because they're not sure, if you're not part of the community there, what's going to happen to your house, to your home, your property under that.
Do you see what I see happening with that? It's causing a divide.
Yes.
To hate us.
Yes.
To then have them hate us. And all we want to do is help and work with most everyone because we have had the genocide upon our people. My grandfather was shot and killed in the back. My grandparents and other grandparents of people in my tribe were raised in boarding schools.
Yeah.
We know this genocide that they're now imposing on a global scale. We know what everyone's facing. We've been living it. So who better to then come to and let us help and us all join together as opposed to trying to take it on yourself and steal our thumbprints and put our signatures through the thumbprint and then take over our sovereignty. Because then the government says, guess what? Those that hold that sovereignty can't control their abilities to own that, and they come in and strip us of it. So then they're damaging us all.
Yeah, so while UNDRIP may on the surface appear to be something that's very virtuous, it is in reality very, very dangerous because I've read it and it is so loosely worded. I don't think it even comes close to reaching the bar of what a legal document should ever be. It's just too vague. And that is where the real danger in this comes in. And because it's doing exactly what you've said, it's creating this division between First Nations and the colonialists or the settlers, wherever they may have come from.
And all of it goes back to a power struggle. All of it goes back to money. It all goes back to being in control. And we are humble, open, honest people, Choctaw people. That is our logo. That is our slogan. We want to work with the communities because that's the only way we survive.
Yeah.
We're going to thrive if we combine and work together. But in doing so, you have these, again, sovereign citizenships, these sovereign movements that are coming in, and now they're causing us harm. And It's a divide. It's an absolute divide, just like COVID, whenever they went after, China and stated that it came from a bat. Then all of a sudden you heard all this global news that the Chinese were being targeted and stuff. It's almost motivated to do just what it's doing, and it's working.
Oh, yes. And you've touched on something that's been of extreme concern to me because I also see these sovereign citizen organizations, common law groups, and others, who are looking, I think, for some sort of protection, and they're also upset with the government. They're trying to reassert, or this is fueling like anti-government actions, and the people who are initiating those actions, in some cases, are hiding behind the First Nations. They want to sort of unite with the First Nations, but in reality, they just want to put the First Nation out in front of them, whichever First Nation they align with, to use them as a shield. Am I correct in that?
You are. And that's where the theft begins. And then that is where we are left fighting this. I mean, Grand Chief Wabisca is now the one having to sort through this and then pray that he can, one, fix things and correct it so the nation itself doesn't fall, because that's what's going to wind up happening to all of us if this continues. Please, everyone, just pay attention. If you don't know, come to someone that you do know and trust and talk to us to where we can help you. I'm always open to discuss anything with anyone, so we are going in a good way. We are also addressing the global issues that we are dealing with. I come across so many tribes that are closed off due to this. There are chiefs that I have reached out to speak to, and they won't open their doors to talk to you because of this very thing that has happened with Asmund. But that restricts us, and the government expects us to fight amongst one another, and then it all falls, and they come in and they solve the problem, and it only creates a bigger problem of control. We have to stop it somehow.
So so you've been involved in some efforts to try to begin a process of fixing this problem, fixing the confusion, finding a path forward, and you're doing that through legal avenues. Can you explain what you've been active with?
Well, as of current, I am running the International Indigenous Children and Family Services Global. I work with families in Australia, families in Germany, families in Canada, Newfoundland, here in the U.S., small tribes, unceded tribes that have the lineage, but they refuse to cede to the government, so the government can't enforce treaties that the forefathers put on us. In that instance, I'm hoping that brings the unity that we need. We do have that loose ability through UNDRIP to self-govern. So if I can provide the self-governing board that then helps protect everyone, then that's hopefully the avenue that will help us unite, our voices raised together, because we're never going to get anywhere speaking solely by ourselves. You're not going to get heard.
Yeah, Asmund is the entry point, I think, for a lot this fraud, because the members of Asmund are Métis, mixed blood. So this is where that can create ambiguity, and confusion, and an opening, I think, for people who want to abuse that and distort it, pervert it into something where you get to create fake membership cards for people.
Right. The fake membership cards, I've noticed in a lot of them, if you look at them, they don't look like a correct card. They don't have your passport photo. If you are an Indigenous tribe, you have to be able to use that card for complete identity. Your driver, it works as a driver's license. It is your passport. It is all those things. So when you have these cards that just have a slogan on the back and an emblem on the front, that's no different than a gym membership card. There is not a nation I know that doesn't have you use your card as your identity with your Indigenous name on the front of it, not a membership on the back.
Right.
There's no difference in saying that's a gym membership versus if it's a sovereign card, it's going to identify you as sovereignty.
Are you able to provide a definition of what a true Métis person would be in Canada or the U.S.?
Okay, and again, that definition would go back to having the lineage that you can then produce and prove that you are blood related to those of the island before the settlers came. In my instance, I'm Choctaw people. My bloodline goes back to, my last name is Bond. Feel free to look me up. I'm in the actual Choctaw State of the Nation address. My family is interviewed in there for Uncle Ridgway and others within our bloodline. The Bond name is synonymous through Choctaw. I'm able to then go into that and literally take my birth certificate back to my mother's, then from my mother and my father back to their parents, and then back to their parents, which then lands us in Choctaw territory in Oklahoma during the Trail of Tears, of which then we were all moved and scattered from Mississippi on. It is the same for Métis in the Aboriginals in Canada. You have to prove your lineage going back to those of the land before the settlers came in and took over in a colonial level.
Yeah, and if I understand it, the true Asman Nation, that the history goes way back to, I think even like the 1400s, the recorded history, and even to like, I think it started in Bolivia, right, and then came up all the way up into Canada and the St. Lawrence.
Mm-hmm. And then the French people settled in, and even I understand Grand Chief Wabisca to even have lineage into Scotland. His lineage is all over the map. He's got a ton of lineage, but I'm going to state this. Grand Chief Wabisca, if you ever question that his lineage is or isn't, here's another level to understand. You can't hold any level of enforcement in even the colonial government without proving that lineage, and Grand Chief Wabisca was Indian Affairs for 20 years himself. His lineage is noted and stated. This is why this is so damaging to having this happen to his nation. It's there. They can't say that they're gone. The government would like to have you believe that some of our people are gone. We're extinct. And we're not. We're right here screaming from the rooftops. You're whitewashing us out. And we never went anywhere. And we are still here to stay. The battle cry on the field of our forefathers was, "We shall remain," and that's where we're at today. I don't care what you think. As those Indians went into war on the field in the states to protect our lands, our borders, and our territory, they would scream, "We shall remain." And I sit here today because of that. We will remain. But this is very hurtful, and it bothers me to watch this happening to Grand Chief and other chiefs that are having to deal with proving who they are so our sovereignty isn't gone. They want nothing more to eradicate us because we're the only thing that is standing between them and one world government. And if you don't take that statement very seriously, I don't know what you will. We have to work together. Please do not strip us of our rights because you want something out of fear. We got to come together and help one another, period.
In a proper way, and not through some fake nations and having,
That's all it is. It's theft. Call it what it is. It's theft. And it is not this is not the time. I think we are all able to say that we've never seen the times we've had. Our children you can't meet a child from 20 years ago that can compare to what our children now are facing. None of us know what it was like to go through a global shutdown and have schools closed on us. But this generation of kids, they do. That tells you the damage our world is in right now. We are in a type of world that no one has ever seen before. We don't know what is coming. And the last thing you need to be doing is causing destruction amongst one another. And that's what's happening.
Yeah. And this United Nations declaration is the catalyst really for all of this that's going on right now.
What I see happening with that United Nations document is it's going around into freedom movements. Freedom rights, truckers, drivers, they're taking it and twisting it to use it into their definitions. So it gives them some sort of leverage. But in the long run, we're sitting right where we're sitting because it's not true. Asman is in the boat it's in because just because you said it doesn't mean it's so. And I know that I will have a ton of people upset with me. I've had some inside of Asman that are upset when they hear this because it's not what they want to hear. But it is the reality of where we're at. Whether we believe the government is on the right track or not, whether we see that it's crumbling, whether you're trying to run from it, I don't care. Our reality is the colonial government and the sovereign governments of the First Nations is what you have working. That's it. Nothing else. These tribunals of the land, tell me one that has had law enforcement and it be upheld. They're still fighting for that.
Right.
I understand it. Keep fighting for it, but that's about 10 years out probably, that those tribunals will have standing. As it's seen now, and the word I've heard complete being used is an overthrow of the government, to have these pop-up sovereign citizen movements to be throwing up these tribunals and then wishing that their orders be upheld by the colonial system based off common law. No. I get it. I get where it's coming from, but that does not mean that that's what the government's going to recognize. What they recognize is our sovereignty, which is why thumbprints are stolen and signatures are being used in places they shouldn't be used. So then that sovereign citizenship movement can claim they have something they didn't ever really truly have.
Right. And the problem with the sovereign citizen movements is that the people fronting these things, they're like, who the heck put them in charge?
Please do some research. We are in a day and age where the battle is no longer on the war field with your horse and your bow and arrow. Take up your weapons that you have, people. Get on the internet, do some searching for who you are talking to. If you're standing there talking to someone that's telling you have a sovereign ability to be adopted and have all these sovereign laws given to you, research the person that's telling you that. Please. Make sure they're who they're saying they are, that there's no criminal records behind them, or that they haven't caused uprising within inside of the government themselves with a freedom movement, because I have come across many through this. Been arrested through it all, and none of that goes well. You can't practice law after you've been held accountable in the colonial law, even in our sovereign systems. If you've been stripped of it, you've been stripped of it, and there's no putting you back in that position of power because you hopped one jurisdiction and came to the other. It doesn't work that way. And I think just about anyone should be able to understand that.
And right now, I guess immediately the way you're trying to deal with this is through the current colonial legal system, by having law enforcement look at some of this fraud taking place. Can you explain what's happening there?
Yes, the RCMP has been contacted and been involved thus far to trying to look into the current things on the Canadian side. Again, Grand Chief Wabisca himself has been Indian Affairs. He has retired from there a while back, but still has family members that are inside of Indian Affairs on his end. Indian Affairs on the U.S. side has also been contacted, and there is involvement on their end to try to sift through, because as much as I hate to say this, it's theft among the people of Asman. Even the money that was taken in through Asman, let's just go back and understand, people that took over the Asman didn't have the lineage to be running it, but then they started selling their products and their things, such as law classes of the common law, healers classes, a healer's license when you sign up for $250. You start adding all that up, it turns into a financial battle. That where did the money go? Now Indian Affairs and everyone else needs to know, where did money go? It didn't go back to Grand Chief and the actual true Asman and Anishinaabe Soul Train Metsa people. So whose pockets did it line? And so they're literally having to look through that. I have spoken with many people that have told me they're trying to get money back from things that they invested in. They're very upset. They don't know who to get in contact with. The websites are taken down by the people that took it over, and they can't even click to go in there and contact them and ask them for refunds. It's a mess, financial mess, and it's also a mess for the people that have lost money. And in the colonial system, that's called a civil lawsuit.
And I think these fake entities, these fake Asman entities, have been selling citizenship or adoption packages for about $24 to $50 a year plus a monthly fee.
No, they upped the price to $75 as of February this year, and then $75 more to actually retrieve your certificate out of the web page and in a PDF format, of which you then still needed to take to Office Depot, Office Max, or somewhere a printing form and get it printed out. And it's a certificate that is on a sheet of paper. Any kind of sovereign citizenship that's handing you a certificate and not an ID card, there you need to question that.
Yes. And the federal government in Canada, and I would think in the U.S. as well, probably wouldn't recognize that anyway. Am I correct?
Yeah, to the point that they're beginning to question the Supreme Court. I am very aware of cases, one as recent as yesterday, is addressing the fact that Asman's fake, because the people that were running it are fake. So now Grand Chief has to refight to claim his lineage again and his standing of recognition as who he is, because during his recovery, it was hijacked, literally hijacked. And the colonial system is very aware of the person that was running it, one of the four key players that was running it. And as of yesterday in the courtroom, that was addressed again. So
and you have just been in court, correct?
Yes. In court yesterday with, I'm quite sure many of the viewers might recognize the name Dr. Mel Boucher. His case made Canadian news over there for his uncovering of the vaccines and how it caused stillbirths and sterilization in women, targeted into Indigenous tribes as well. he took it to court. He had a hearing yesterday, but he was being represented by the people inside of that fake Asman nation, and the attorneys from Lionsgate Hospital, that is, were able to surmise apparently that the gentleman representing himself was disbarred from the Law Society in Canada, and who he actually was, and it was brought forth to the judge. So that whole court case had to be postponed so he could find new legal representation and prove himself to not have been involved with the fact he was allowing a disbarred member to represent his case. Again, very damaging to his cause, his name, his motion in the Supreme Court, as well as, again, many people inside of Asman.
The federal government in Canada has been going through a process of reworking treaties. I think they've now reworked about 27. In addition to that, they have unilaterally adopted the terms of UNDRIP. They signed additional legislation making UNDRIP binding within Canada. So now all legislation, everything in Canada, has to integrate with UNDRIP. Do you think that is increasing the danger? Is the Trudeau government on the right path with any of that?
I absolutely agree that it is more damaging, because I can't come across a police officer that pulls us over and I hand my card out the window and they know how to handle the traffic stop based on my status as a Native American. They don't know the law. They're not trained in it. They're trained in colonial law, and they want to give you a ticket on their road, right?
Right.
How is it that the jurisdiction of the Supreme Courts and all that, they're not vetted, they're not educated, they didn't go to college in Aboriginal law and in Native American law. So when they read the words of UNDRIP, and I've even seen it myself, they in the courtroom don't know what to do. They're reading these loose terms and they're afraid to approach it themselves. And so then it's allowing the false people, the fake people, to then come in and do exactly what happened in Dr. Mel's case, to then take it over and twist the words, and the judge is unable to decipher what the actual meaning is. And now you've got rulings being made that are being upheld on those loose terms without the true definition of it being actually there, of what is enforced by Indian Affairs, by the Indian Act, by the Royal Proclamation. Those are all important things. You have to go back and combine, as you said, the treaties and the actual Indigenous laws that are actually imposed upon us as our people to have that sovereignty, to then be able to make a ruling on it in the colonial system. And most of your even colonial judicial people are not educated in it or well enough to surmise the correct ruling.
And even though the federal government in Canada, when I listened to the Justice Minister, Mr. Lametti, talk about creating this parallel legal system where First Nations peoples can choose which path they want to choose if they're charged with something or they're facing some sort of a charge. Is that even a real thing? I mean, is this new path even based realistically on this? Does it respect the sovereignty of First Nations? It's really just like a secondary lane for a colonial system, right?
Exactly. You're exactly right on that. You take something like that to a court system, say Choctaw Nations Tribunal or a First Nations actual tribunal versus the colonial system, and you're going to see that middle lane doesn't meet, and you're going to have a divide again. Nobody knows what to do with the terminologies that are thrown out there, allowing that loose term. It's damaging, because what I've heard, and there was a recent conference in Winnipeg. It went on for 2 days about the pretend Indians, and there are chiefs of the banded tribes inside of First Nations that are calling for the blood quantum to come to Canada to stop this. They feel like that's the answer. I can literally tell you it's going to whitewash you out and you're going to not have any land, and the government wants that. It is something I stand on permanently here, that if you want to tell me that we are whitewashed out people and that our lineage is gone, then how does it not apply to whenever you're talking about the royals? Prince Harry can marry whomever he wants, and however many he can marry 10 times over, and every kid he has with 10 women will still carry that lineage and hold the seat in the throne as the throne of the prince or the princess. Why is that? Because of the blood. You can't whitewash us out, but that's where this is heading by saying blood quantum. It's feasibly not doable, but it's becoming the only answer to the pretend Indian and the sovereign citizenship movement, which has put a stranglehold on us in the States for years.
And when you start going down that path, I mean, I personally, I see real danger there, because now you're getting into issues of nationalism and then ethno-nationalism, which you could say is even fascistic, because it fuels further division based on race, which is extremely dangerous, as we've seen through history. And that's what leads to real genocides.
Taking it. Political correctness. I don't even like it. It does. We're causing that division again, and everybody wants to be politically correct in their terminology. But then the government has prompted us to say you need to be politically correct. Well, then they slip in all of this ability to then cause that divide. It isn't. You're dealing with a monster.
It's insidious, isn't it? It's so twisted and dark.
Yep. And you know what? I feel like I understand why chiefs of other nations close themselves off, but I will not let them shut me up. I will scream this from the rooftops, because if I can get people to understand to just come to the right places, make sure that you're making an educated decision and understanding both laws, indigenous versus colonial, and understanding sovereignty and what that actually truly does mean, not based off of a loose terminology that has the ability to be twisted. Go look at the laws, come talk to us. And if I can't tell you people that ask me to adopt them, I have to really, this is the strict stronghold that's on us in the States because of the blood quantum status. And you have to prove that birth, death certificate all the way back 6 generations. I can't just say I can adopt you. You have to show to me you were part of that 5 civilized tribes. What, we were crazy dogs or something, but we were now civilized. They put that term on us, and now I have to prove that we are part of the 5 civilized tribes before I can adopt you, of some lineage. And you have to have that blood quantum. I don't think people in Canada want that, if you really truly look at what that is. So please don't risk it. I ask everyone, don't risk putting First Nations people in Canada through this. Don't.
So can you describe or give us a possible path forward where we can get to peaceful resolution on this?
The best path forward is to, one, understand the reality of where you're at. Don't go into the sovereign citizenship movement understanding that it's a trust and it's a sovereign society, as they're calling it, and that excludes you from the colonial system. I want you to understand, if you file for a sovereign society and you still have a trust fund, you're still locking that into the government. Please look at that. You're still setting up a banking, you're still setting up trusts, you're still setting up some level of a copyrighted corporation through what? The government. So you're not excluding yourself from the government. The only way to truly do that is to come into the sovereign society of an actual Aboriginal and Native Americans. In that instance, you can be adopted and you can be turned and appointed into seats. There are rules that go against that people don't like. You're not supposed to be able to have voting rights and stuff inside of tribes. A lot of those are bylaws. You will find that if I have a chief I work with that literally she says it's a little bit different in their country, and it is. It's different from country to country. Just like us, we have the blood quantum that we're one of the few. And I want everyone to recognize that the States doesn't even follow UNDRIP. We follow what is called ADRIP. It was acknowledged and put into place by Barack Obama. It's very closely worded as UNDRIP, but it's still ADRIP. And this is what Canada's leaning towards dealing with. And you're going to see yourself make that movement into it if this sovereign society shift continues to happen. And then they call themselves Native Americans or Aboriginals. So come to those that you know are in a tribe that is recognized, or a state recognized tribe, or a federally recognized tribe. Like, Choctaw people are federally recognized people. Come talk with them. Come talk with your Aboriginals that you know have that. Ask to speak to the Grand Chief. Most Grand Chiefs will not close themselves off. Most chiefs are willing to discuss this and make sure that it's done and handled properly, because we know the damage that can happen. So move forward in educating yourself in the laws. Come talk with us. We have open meetings. I currently am working with, like I said, with IICFS. It is the International Indigenous Children and Family Services. I'm reaching out. I'm pulling in people. We're doing our self-governing. We have, like I said, families from Australia all the way back over into Canada and Newfoundland. in that instance, it's being able to join people together. We offer therapy services. We're offering online schooling classes. We have our law classes that we're teaching. And in that instance, if you're adopted in, you're able to be into all of those things. But it needs to be done properly and right beforehand. So.
Well, I'm so grateful for you coming on and explaining all of this.
I feel
Yeah.
like it could be a topic that you could discuss for 10 days and nobody's going to come out of there with any more clarity than what they went in, because it's been so misused. So feel free, anyone that is hearing this, to reach out to me, to talk to us. Let's work together, because we can move mountains when our voices are heard as a unity. And that's only going to happen if we all, even those that claim they're not Aboriginal or can't lay, I've heard one lady tell me, I can't lay my claim to claim to that. Don't let that divide you. Come to us. There's ways we can all form together and work together. But it's not going to work if we're in divide with you. And it's not going to work if you're stealing identities and signatures and using them for your own rights, because you're going to then risk the only option you're trying to claim fame to being demolished as well. You won't even have that option to try and steal it anymore. It's damaging in every angle.
So what would be kind of a final word to people who are not First Nations community citizens, to the colonials?
Get involved. We have community powwows. We have community open things. Even all the way up in California, there's multitudes of open communities that will allow everyone to come in, know your traditions, learn through the powwows, connect with true Aboriginals and Natives, because they want to connect with you. We want to connect with you. But come to us and connect, and then we can give you the teachings so you understand. But if you're getting those teachings, let's just look at it like this. Most Aboriginal people don't hand out plastics. I think most people know this. We don't run around with plastic water bottles, because we're designated to Mother Earth, and we want to leave it as we found it. And plastic, as we all know, is damaging the earth. So if you walk up on somewhere and they're selling plastic water bottles, you obviously need to question where it's coming from. Or they're giving out plastic turtles and hula necklaces. We don't want to damage Mother Earth. So the divine teachings of sovereignty that come from the wisdom of our elders in our tribes is something that you can grapple onto, and you're going to find yourself in a solid foundation of understanding our laws, and then being able to be admitted into the community, because as many chiefs we want to connect with people that want that same outcome with us, thus enabling us to give honorary placements, adoptions, and such to those that are going in a good way, to make sure that Mother Earth is upheld. It was our gift from our Creator. Why are we destroying it?
So is that the message that you would give to my next door neighbor? Is,
yes.
Go down and connect with the First Nations community. He might be worried about losing his house or the rights to the land that his house sits on. I think that's kind of where people's mindset is, right?
I would like to ask, though, who's the one that's going to be the one imposing all these treaties back onto it? It's the government that is telling us all of a sudden they're fixing the treaties that have happened. I don't think that there's a single nation that's going to come in here and throw you out on the street and take your home from you. If they give the treaty back to the people that were here first, we're going to ensure that the people of the land are covered. I'm humble, open, honest individual. I'm not out to cause damage to other people. I would never do that. If the government comes to me and says, hey, Chief Miko, we're going to wind up giving you all of the Louisiana Purchase back because we understand that treaty was fraud. I'm not going to, how am I going to throw every citizen of the whole state of Louisiana out because I said it's my land claim now? I'm going to want to work with them. We thrive together. We commune together. Right. And that means survival of our people. Nobody's going to go down that road of throwing you out of your home. I can attest to that as a chief sitting here. I don't think anyone would remove you from your home. You're going to want to work with us so we can provide you that sovereignty. Your land then is located on sovereign land that the U.S. government, that the Canadian government can't come into your home then on, because then you're on our land, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that what you would want? That's what you're trying to get by stealing the signatures and by thefting our names. Imagine if the treaty gives us your land back. You're sitting right in our property. They can't touch you then.
Right. Then you're under the jurisdiction of
Ours.
whatever first, if you're,
And we're going to protect you.
so what does that look like for a homeowner who's then under your jurisdiction?
Protection of what they're literally trying to run from. That land is now back to the people that properly owned it. So as long as you're going in a good way, again, learn the 7 teachings of the grandfather teachings of how to live in an Indigenous community. Reach out to those powwows that you hear. You can hear our powwows going on. You're driving down the road, you hear them going on because our drums, which are made in a circle, connect you back to Mother Earth. And every beat on that drum is an actual heartbeat of Mother Earth. There is a synchronized of life inside of Earth. Connect yourself to us, and we can connect you back to it as long as you're going in a good way and you're being able to support, and we all thrive and live. That's all we're asking for, peace and harmony. That's all anyone would want, right? I don't think anybody likes where the world's going right now. Do you?
No, because there's way too much division and too much violence, in my view. But I do see that this gets to be complicated because you have titles to land, titles to property, and then if sovereignty is shifted to First Nations, then people will say, well, where's my right as a property owner? What piece of paper do I have showing that I still have the deed to this house or
this land,
anything, or this land?
And that's going to fall under the jurisdiction of the first people. Just acknowledge you there, adopt you in, and they're not going to touch your stuff. Don't sit there and I will never believe, it's been done to our people. I can give you David Gray Eagle, many people, they'll talk about how their homes were demolished and run over by corporations like Amazon so they could put their corporate warehouse over their people, run their houses over while they were dead asleep inside. They didn't make it out. There's no way our people, anybody, is going to have that same venomous behavior towards someone who had a home on there before the government gave it back to us. We would never do that, ever. So work with us. We'll work with you. And don't you think for one split second that the government isn't going to try and stop all that to begin with anyway. It's a bait to cause that division that you're talking about right there. Everybody's become fearful of what's going to happen to my property. Oh, those Indians are going to take it, which I have heard. It's unfathomable to me that you would think that swiftly that was going to happen. The government doesn't want us to have our land anyway. What are they working for? When you hear Trudeau talk and you hear Biden talk, the words coming out of their mouth match, just like the MSN news reporters. They're all saying the exact same story to the exact same word and stutter because they're coached, they're mouthpieces. The whole bottom line is we're looking at a one world takeover, a one world government. So do you think that they're truly, really looking into giving us those treaties to say, hey, the land's yours again, when that's what they ultimately are wanting? What I see them doing is using that as a carrot to dangle in front of your face to cause fear of us and divide of us. Work with us. That way we can somehow make that come true. But I don't see any government willingly just giving us that back. Think about it.
Well, I hope that people are better able to understand this. And just a couple of other things. How can people find the true Asmin Nation? Is there a website, a proper website, or some other place where they can get the correct information?
They can reach out to me. As of right now, all of the websites have been taken down by the theft. The one that is left up that I'm able to see, you can't click the join button and become a member. You can reach out and it says askitforequity.com. That is not run by Grand Chief Wabisca. And as of right now, he's brought everything down through this investigation so you can ensure that you're not talking to the wrong people. If you find an Asmin website that's up, it's not him. He's taken everything. He took anything that was legit down, and then those that thefted took down Asmin of Turtle Island and Asmin.com. What I understand that is still up is askitforequity.com. But that's a fraud website. So you're not going to find the true Asmin up anywhere.
Let me just see if I can find these.
Reach out to me or to the International Indigenous Children and Family Services. I can give you direct contact with him. He has done a few talking stick circles where he explained why he was making the nation go dark, because again, he's under attack. and cultural and heritage means that during that attack, you go down, you stay quiet, and you let the investigation happen so those that are frauding it are found.
Okay, so I have this website up. I'll show you this one. Okay, here. So what is that?
That is the pretend ones. That is not ours.
Okay.
That is the Asmina Boreal, and that is also one of the ones that has been given a public notice by Grand Chief Wabisca to cease and desist.
And that is before, did you say the Supreme Court now?
It's not before, it's come up in discussion of other cases where that false Asmin was representing people inside of the Supreme Court.
Okay.
So it was discussed yesterday to decipher who was actually the true Indigenous representative of that gentleman. And that Asmin has been removed and the case has been postponed. Asmin, as is any others, if you guys are in a case that has led you to the Supreme Court due to this, I ask that you again can reach out to International Indigenous Children and Family Services. I can help you. Get in touch.
This is the other one?
This is the Ask It website, which I know for a fact is being run by the ones that have also been given a cease and desist. I'm doing my best to make sure that I don't name names, but I know a lot of people know their names because they've been the face of the AIM Tribunal and the ASMIN website for 4 years. If it's not Grand Chief Wabisca, who is an elderly, not elderly, he's an older man. He's in his 70s, and you'll know. You can look at him and tell you he's First Nations people. If they're looking like an Italian or they're looking like a white man, almost like me, I hate to say it, you might want to question it. You might want to question it because the bottom line is if you can't prove your lineage, and I would say that again, ask them for their lineage. They need to prove it. You can self-determine, and it's up to you to prove it. And none of them have been able to prove it. All of them have been given public notices and orders to remove themselves from ASMIN, thus at least removing liability from Grand Chief Wabisca for any of their fraudulent activities, thus moving forward.
Yeah, and you see here even the wording, the phrasing welcomes all to our family.
Right.
Like anybody can join.
Yep, and anybody can join, but you're going to have to do a level of some proving who you are. You can't just say it, and it's so be. Forgive me, but political correctness has led us down that road to where you can almost say that you're a dog. You feel like a dog, so you're a dog, or you feel like a kitty cat today, and you're a kitty cat.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is you can look at that and tell that person's not a cat. So we have to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to not be misled.
Interesting how that plays into all of this, isn't it? You can identify as a man or a woman or a transgender, or you can be anything you want to be. You can literally be a cat if you want to be. And I guess if that's the logic that flows, then you can be Indigenous First Nations if you want to be.
Until you get into some serious legal trouble, and then guess what?
Yeah.
You're in some serious legal trouble that the colonial system will say, I'm not supporting you on that. You may say that you're Indian, but you better prove it. I had another gentleman that went into court 2 weeks ago, and he stood there in front of the judge, and she questioned him, what's your lineage? Because she was aware, that judge has been made aware of this as well. And he called me when he came out of court. I didn't even know who he was, but he called our international line and said, I'm lost. I literally just had my face slapped with a wet towel because I believed that I was Asmin. I said, do you even know your lineage? He said, I can tell you right now, I don't have any lineage. That would lead me back to being able to say I'm Aboriginal. I said, so then when you signed up to Asmin, did you know that you were basically lying? He said, well, they said I could adopt anybody. Anyone is adopted. That's where I say again, if it sounds too good to be true, then you better investigate it, because he got himself into some serious trouble within inside of what is considered the colonial system through some of his own issues. And that judge is laughing him out of the room at this point because they knew enough. I mean, they know just enough to know that you still have to prove that. You still have to prove it.
We're living in a world where everything is upside down. People don't know what's real, what isn't real. And I think that some people like it that way because they're profiting from it and maybe even
living in denial That's what I can say. Living in denial is sweet. When you wake up to the seriousness and the severity of stuff like this, and actually what's going on in the world, and the those that are in power and control in the elite seats, it's a heavy hit on the head to make you realize you better stand up and take action. So call me an activist if you want. Call me a chief if you want. Call me a governing officer. Call me a mom. I don't care. What I'm seeing is that we have to unite, period. And causing this divide is going to damage everything.
Yes, because if you're living in a world where you can self-identify as anything you want, then nothing is real anymore. You can identify as anything you want, but now even things that are real don't mean anything. So, and that's what's putting the First Nations at real risk, because that is what could ultimately destroy your sovereignty, destroy your heritage, destroy everything, destroy your culture, destroy everything that you are.
Yes, and then that leaves us with nothing but a one world government, and I don't think anyone wants that. So I beseech you to please work with us. We, again, are the only thing standing between that one world government, and don't think for 1 second they don't want that gone.
Okay. How can people reach you if they want to? Do you have an email address, a website that I can?
Yes, sir. It is. It's a long one, but it's easy if you think about what we are. We are Children and Family Services. So the email is Children and Family Services at internationalindigenous.com.
Okay, I'm going to put that up on the screen here. I took shorthand. There. Now I have to try and read my chicken scratch. I'm going to put it up on a banner here for people.
Okay.
Okay, so it is Children and Family Services at internationalindigenous.com.
Yes. That's it.
Hang on, I have to get rid of that so I can put this up. That should do it. There we go. Let me see if I got the spelling.
Yeah.
Children and Family Services at internationalindigenous.com. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay, I'm so grateful. Is there anything else that you would like to add or think that we might have missed in this conversation today?
No, I want to say that I feel for everyone. I feel for those that have been bamboozled, as I like to say, or hijacked, as Grand Chief likes to word it. I applaud those that are standing up through it and trying to support us. I know some people like to call themselves Wolverines for the indigenous and natives that have had the cultural genocide happening to them. But I want you to understand that genocide is global now. 5-minute cities, 15-minute cities, that's no different than slapping you in a reservation. So let's work together. We can unite. The Hopi prophecy, the eagle and the condor, it talks about that 7th generation rising together. And I believe with all of my heart that as I sit here, we are in that 7th generation and we can move mountains. We just have to unite properly, guys.
Yeah. The message is go in peace.
Yes. Literally.
Don't fall into the trap of violence, because that will lead
anger, discord. That's not what we're about. No one is. No one should be. If they are and they're slandering people and they're putting people down, it is complete discord, and that's not something we want. I'm very cautious in the way that I talk. I try very hard to not, even as of now, to disrespect even those that are in the middle of this, as even the fraudsters. As it's being coin-phrased. I understand they may have started with a good way, but it is so easy for the evil to take over. So I just pray our Creator brings a hedge of protection around us as humanity right now. That's where we're at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
So there you go, and thank you. I do thank Miko Hihuiti for sharing all of that with us. As I said, this is all in dispute. This is really a huge mess, legally, politically. It's throwing our relationship, the relationship between First Nations, the general public, the federal government, the provincial governments, even our municipal governments. It's throwing it all into a state of disruption and maybe even deconstruction. The only way forward, I think, has to be through honesty, truth, and peace. It's imperative. I will say more about this tomorrow night. I'll give you an example of why this whole situation with First Nations rights, the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, which applies globally, not just in Canada, has created this huge mess, and the impact that it's having here in North America, across what First Nations peoples would describe as Turtle Island. It's a very dangerous situation. I should also point out that as much as UNDRIP paves the way for the return of lands and sovereignty on some level to First Nations, I have read it. The document also indicates that it is not intended to undermine the authority or sovereignty of any existing government. That being said, that means it's not intended to take sovereignty away from the Canadian federal government or the federal government in the United States either. That just adds to the confusion, creates disruption, and I'm not sure where it's all going to end up legally. The matter at hand here is really about people pretending to be Indians, pretendians, and people who are fostering that seem to be engaged in some level of fraud, where they have no authority, no sovereignty, no mandate, there's nothing to legitimately entitle them to offer anyone citizenship or membership in anything for any price or even for free. And it's putting First Nations cultures and communities at risk. It's putting us all at risk. It's creating even more division. And this is coming, it's flowing from the sovereign citizens movement largely, and the common law movement largely, which has also attached itself aggressively to the freedom movement. And it is not a good thing, because it's delegitimizing a lot of what is going on. It is making it difficult for even the federal government to know who they should be dealing with. There have been cases where the federal government has even given huge sums of money now to organizations which may not even be legitimate First Nations groups. This is what's at stake. This is why it's being done, to protect power, to protect rights, to protect property in the face of fear, and also to scoop up power and money. And it's on many levels, it's pretty evil. It's pretty it's incredibly dishonest. And I'll give you at least one example tomorrow night here on the program to illustrate what I'm talking about. There's no future in a lie. I don't know about you, but I don't want to live a lie. Why people would want to live a lie, live a life of pretending to be an Indian or an indigenous person, there's no real future in that. That can only lead to bad things. Nothing good will come of that. But to claim false status, to pay a fee, to say that you're this or you're that, to say you're an Indian, pretending to be an Indian, that's all fake. They're using fake law, pseudo law, to initiate fake land claims, fake to claim fake status as Indians, to defraud people of money so they can live a fake life, have a fake existence. I mean, they're literally creating something fake. Not by saying that the current government is fake and that it's just they're turning everything into a construct. No wonder we've seen the rise of these movements and why there's so much division and dysfunctionality within the freedom movement at this point as well. I'll show you more about it tomorrow night and help clarify in a simplified way. I'll give you an example of something that has been happening that will help you understand more clearly. But it really comes down to that. People paying money to claim status as an Indian or an indigenous person when they're not indigenous at all. It's 100% pure fake. While they sit there and accuse or say that the government is fake, that all these other things are fake. It's that they have no respect for anything. It's that they don't believe in the authority of anything, ultimately. And it's all about selfishness and greed. And it's actually pretty disgusting. More about it tomorrow. Okay, so tonight in Rhode Island, there was a deer. You ever hit a deer with your car? The results can be devastating, can be fatal. Deer can go through your windshield. I've hit a deer. I hit a deer in my car a few years ago. I clipped one. I was very lucky. I know other people who've had their cars completely destroyed hitting a deer. Well, in Rhode Island, a bus in a residential area, right within a city district, traveling down the road, deer went right through the window of this bus. Here's the video. Here it is, and bam! Look at that, right through the glass. Where it just came out of nowhere. Now here's a shot inside the bus, security camera, and if this doesn't startle you, I don't know what would. Holy smokes! Deer still gets up. Well, tried to anyway. And again, front shot. Now you notice the deer was not cut up. That's because obviously it's safety glass. And look at the way the glass breaks. Here comes the deer. And bam. See, it turns into pebbles so that you don't get cut. But still, that deer, I'm surprised it was able to get up at all, or even try to get up. To go through that windshield like that, do you know how much force that takes? Very scary. 3 people, as I understand it, were injured in that incident with the deer going through the windshield. So, scary stuff. You just never know what's going to come at you. And with that being said, folks, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Appreciate everybody hanging out here with me and our guest, and thank you to John for his input tonight on the Hunter Biden story. Greatly appreciated. And I will be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with more of the antivirus programs for your mind. Catch y'all on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.